CS Dog, James Sama, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! America 7. Now in today's episode, we're doing a duel analysis on the climactic Inheritor Duel from Yu-Gi-Oh! HNGRY VII Heritage. To set the stage, George, Gary, and Gradion are three sides of the same coin. Heads, tails, and edge. Destruction, creation, and neutrality. Three people with three different ideologies signified by an archetyper legendary. These three counterparts have met together to fulfill a prophecy back before man discovered the wonders of air conditioning. When one brother got really pissy at another brother getting favoritism, and thus released three gods amongst the universe, the archetyper legendaries. Their power was thought sealed away for good, but as we all know in fiction, sealed away permanently just means do not open until Christmas. The legendary Quasar brings creation and is in possession of Gary, who just wants to bring peace to the world and revive all his friends who have died needlessly in this war. The legendary Red Nova is owned by George, who is fed up with the way the system works and just thinks the world should be burned to the ground, even if it kills countless people in the process. The legendary Halberd Ken is owned by Gradion, who just wants to be left alone to live his life, but has been dragged into this war by fate. He even died for a while for summoning his legendary too soon, but don't worry, he was just basically in a coma, and got to watch everything on Space TV. Now these three men have come together to have a triangle duel to decide who gets all three archetyper legendaries. The winner gets the gods, the losers die. So with all this setup out of the way, let's quit our stalling and get brawling. The duel begins and George goes first. He draws and his opening hand contains Red Resonator, Foxfire, Double Summon, Chain Resonator, and Hackworm. He begins by normal summoning Red Resonator. He uses its effect to special summon a level 4 or lower monster from his hand. He special summons Foxfire. George has his level 2 Resonator tune his level 2 Foxfire to synchro summon level 4 Starmine. Next he activates Double Summon, giving him one additional normal summon this turn. He normal summons Chain Resonator, and since it was normal summon when a synchro was on the field, he can special summon a Resonator from his deck. He summons Crimson Resonator. In addition, because Gary and Gradion control no monsters, George special summons Hackworm from his hand. George then has his level 1 Chain tune his level 1 Worm to synchro summon the level 2 synchro tuner Pureless the Purple Pyrolite. Next he has his level 2 Pyrolite tune his level 4 Starmine to synchro summon Red Wyvern. Finally, George has level 2 Resonator tune his level 6 Wyvern to synchro summon Scarlight Red Dragon Arts Fiend. With that, George ends his turn. It's Gary's turn. He draws and his opening hand contains Tuning, Unknown Synchron, Doppel Warrior, Emergency Teleport, Shooting Star, and a mysterious card that's never seen or used and only set on the last turn, so we're calling it Limit Overdrive. He starts with the spell card Tuning, adding the Synchron Tuner Junk Synchron from his deck to his hand, then milling Quillbot Hedgehog. Next, since Gary's field is empty, he special summons Unknown Synchron from his hand, though this effect is once per duel. After that, he normal summons Junk Synchron. He uses its effect to revive level 2 Quillbot Hedgehog in defense mode. And because a monster was revived from the grave, Gary special summons Doppel Warrior from his hand. Synchro time. Gary has level 3 Junk Synchron tune level 2 Doppel Warrior to synchro summon level 5 TG Hyper Librarian. Next, since Doppel Warrior was used as synchro material, it spawns 2 Doppel tokens, level 1 Dark Warriors with 400 attack and defense. Next, Gary has level 1 Unknown Synchron tune one of his Doppel tokens to synchro summon level 2 Formula Synchron. Formula and Librarian's effects activate. Formula lets him draw 1 card when it's synchro summon, and Librarian lets him draw a card when his synchro summon is performed. So Gary draws 2 cards, which are Forbidden Chalice and Road Synchron. Next he uses Emergency Teleport, summoning a level 3 or lower psychic monster from his deck. He summons a tuner Mental Seeker. He immediately has level 3 Mental Seeker tune his level 2 Quillbot Hedgehog. He synchro summons level 5 Scarred Warrior. Librarian lets him draw a card, which is Wing Karibo, and now it's time for the big guns. Gary has his level 2 Synchro Tuner Formula Synchron tune his level 5 Hyper Librarian and level 5 Scarred Warrior. The other two variants predict an Arch Hyper Legendary, but Gary throws a curveball. He synchro summons level 12 Cosmic Blazar Dragon, a gift from his rival, Jerry. Since none of them can attack till they've all had one turn, Gary ends his turn. Why not set Shooting Star or Chalice? Well, I imagine right now Gary is scouting. See what their decks can do and how they operate, so he can figure out how to most effectively shut down their strategies. After all, hitting the wrong card at the wrong time can affect the entire outcome of a duel. Plus, Shooting Star is a dead card since it doesn't control a Stardust monster, so it's fine they didn't set that one at least. But that's just my justification for it. Moving on. It's Gradion's turn. He draws, and his opening hand holds Tech Genus Striker, Tech Genus Warwolf, Tech Genus Cyber Magician, 2 copies of Tech Genus Rush Rhino, and Tech Genus Gear Zombie. Since George and Gary are the only ones with monsters out, he special summons TG Striker from his hand. And because he special summoned a level 3 or lower monster, he can also special summon TG Warwolf from his hand. Gradion then has level 2 Striker tune his level 3 Warwolf to synchro summon level 5 TG Power Gladiator. Next he normal summons TG Cyber Magician, and with its effect he can use a TG monster in his hand as synchro material. So he has a level 1 Magician on his field, tune a level 4 Rush Rhino in his hand to synchro summon the level 5 synchro tuner TG Star Guardian. Star Guardian's effect activates on synchro summon, letting Gradion add a Tech Genus monster from his grave to his hand. He takes Cyber Magician. Now he has level 5 Guardian tune his level 5 Gladiator to excel synchro summon level 10 Tech Genus Blade Blaster. Gradion ends his turn with that, and since everyone has had a turn, the battle phase is open for business. It's George's turn. He draws and gets Pot of Avarice. First he uses Scarlet's effect, destroying Gary's last double token, and since they're both his opponents, Gary and Gradion take 500 points of damage. Next, George activates Pot of Avarice, reshuffling 5 monsters into his deck, then drawing 2 cards. He gets Pot of Desires and Red Resonator. He activates Desires, banishing 10 to draw 2. He gets a second Red Resonator and Triple Tactics Talent. George normal summons a Red Resonator, then uses its effect to special summon another Red Resonator from his hand. Then the second Resonator increases his life points by Scarlight's attack. So now he's up to 11,000. George then attempts to bring out the big guns. He has his 2 level 2 Resonators tune his level 8 Scarlight, but Gary changed with Cosmic Blazar's effect. By banishing it, he can negate the special summon of a monster. So George lost 3 monsters for nothing. George is devastated by this, but at least he has a plan B. He activates Triple Tactics Talent. Since Gary activated a monster effect during his turn, he's allowed to apply one of 3 effects. He chooses the first one, draw 2 cards. He gets Super Quantum Red Layer and Monster Reborn. Now, since his field is empty while Gradion controls a monster, he can special summon Red Layer from his hand. Next, he uses Monster Reborn to revive Crimson Resonator. He has level 2 Crimson tune his level 5 Layer to synchro summon level 7 Lavalval Salamander.
For crying out loud, we just finished patching that!
Battle phase, George orders Salamander to attack Gary directly. Gary loses 2,600 life points. George ends his turn, and because he did, Blazar returns to Gary's field. Honestly, George did the best he could with what he had available. His big mistake was going for Red Nova when Blazar was on the board, but he obviously didn't know they could negate a synchro summon. The only other misplay is by having Red Resonator boost his life points off Archfiend's attack points, when Blazar is right there with 4,000 attack points. But maybe he was afraid an effect would trigger if he targeted it. But that's just me being devil's advocate. Literally in this case. Anyway, it's Gary's turn. He draws and gets Junk Converter. He uses its effect, discarding it in another Synchron monster in his hand, Road Synchron, to add a different Synchron monster from his deck to his hand. He takes another good old Junk Synchron. He normal summons Junk Synchron, then uses its effect to revive Junk Converter. He then has level 3 Synchron tune his level 2 Converter to synchro summon level 5 Junk Warrior. Now Converter's other effect activates. Since it was used as synchro material, Gary can revive a Synchron from his grave. He revives Junk Synchron. Then Gary has his level 3 Synchron tune his level 5 Warrior to synchro summon Stardust Dragon. Next he activates his skill, giving him a free Formula Synchron and stacking 3 tuners on top of the... Oh wait, sorry. This isn't Duel Links. Man, you see a combo enough times, you just start seeing it everywhere. Gary enters his battle phase and orders Blazar to destroy Salamander, dealing 1,400 points of damage to George. Stardust then attacks directly, dealing 2,500 more points of damage and reducing George to 7,100 life points. Main phase 2, Gary sets Shooting Star and Forbidden Chalice face down and ends his turn. It's Gradion's turn. He draws and gets Forbidden Dress. he normal summons his Cyber Magician that he just added back last turn. Next he uses it to tune the other Rush Rhino in his hand to Synchro summon the Synchro Tuner TG Wonder Magician. Wonder Magician's effect activates on Synchro Summon, which is basically MST. Now Gary has a dilemma. He's the only one with back row, so he'll be the only one hurt by this, so he should negate it. But if he does, George would benefit since he now have one less monster breathing down his neck. Still though, Gary prioritizes his back row. He activates Stardust Dragon's effect, tributing it in order to negate Wonder Magician's effect and destroy it. Gradion sets Forbidden Dress off screen and ends his turn, and thus Stardust Dragon returns to the field. Now, there is a misplay for Gradion not attacking. He lost Magician, yes, but Blade Blaster still has 3,300 attack points and is still sitting there. Meanwhile, George is wide open and just sitting there. You'll want to take advantage of that opportunity. Because trust me, if you were left wide open and George had the advantage, he would not hesitate to strike you. Though, to be fair, the trio were having a big discussion about their powers and explaining how it works, so it's possible Gradion forgot he had Blade Blaster and passed. Plus, Gradion is more of a passive sort of person. He kinda just wants to try and get by in the world, making as few problems as possible. Attacking would just cause problems, so he chose to pass. Plus, he did basically just come back to life, so it's okay that he's not dueling at 100%. But still, I have to point out the misplays, and sorry Gradion, but you made a big misplay here. One that unfortunately will come back to bite you, but we'll get to that later. For now, it's George's turn. He draws and gets a second Pot of Avarice. He activates it, reshuffling another 5 monsters, then draws Cup of Ace and Return of the Dragon Lords. He tests his luck with Cup of Ace. Now he flips a coin. If he gets heads, he draws 2 cards. If tails, Gary and Gradion draw 2 cards. Lucky for him, he lands heads, so he draws Defense Draw and Dogoran, the Mad Flame Kaiju. Now to deal with that annoying Synchro. George sacrifices Gary's Blazar to summon Dogoran, the Mad Flame Kaiju, to Gary's side of the field. Disgusted by this and probably getting Lava Golem PTSD, Gary activates his set Shooting Star. Since he controls a Stardust monster, he can destroy a card on the field. He targets his own Dogoran, but Gradion chains, activating Forbidden Dress. Dogoran loses 600 attack points, but it can't be destroyed or targeted by other card effects this turn. Next, George activates Return of the Dragon Lords to revive his level 8 dragon, Scarlet, Red Dragon Archfiend. He uses the effect to destroy weaker monsters, which would only be Gary's right now, but Gary uses Stardust effect, tributing it to negate Scarlet's effect and destroy it. George uses Return's other effect. By banishing it, he can protect his dragon. However, its effect is still negated. Battle phase, George orders Scarlet to destroy Dogoran. Gary takes 600 points of damage. George then sets Defense Draw face down and ends his turn, and thus Stardust returns to Gary's field. This turn was a bit busy, but that's what's going to happen in a 3-way duel. Anyway, for misplays, Gradion didn't really make any. Yes, he could have saved Dress, but I imagine he just wanted payback for Wonder Magician earlier, so that makes sense. I'll give him a pass. George's mistake, however, was using Scarlet's effect. It's possible he didn't know what the other cards did. I mean, they could read the cards, but we all know that's not going to happen. But it's dumb because Stardust has a built-in destruction negate, and Dogoran is protected by effect destruction due to its pretty dress. So that effect is never going to resolve. The smart play would be just revive it, enter the battle phase, attack Stardust or Dogoran. Stardust would be more beneficial long term, but Dogoran has equal stats to Scarlet, and that power down isn't going to last forever. So that is a short-term problem, to be fair. But either way, you get to keep Return in the grave for use later. And Gary's misplay is that he could have saved Shooting Star for just a bit later. I get he was mad at being Kaiju'd again, and I imagine he was remembering being Lava Golem by Espigo. Plus, when your opponent gives you a free monster, it's never a good sign. But if he saved Shooting Star just a little bit longer, here's what would have happened. George uses Dragon Lords, revives Scarlight. Next, Gary uses Shooting Star on it. George saves it with Dragon Lord's Grave effect. Next, George uses Scarlight's effect to nuke, and Gary uses Starlight's effect to negate and this time successfully destroy it. And now you and Gradion have strong monsters, while George has nothing but a defense draw and maybe some prayers. He can block 1 attack, but he can't block all 3. So this turn was a bit of a cluster and mistakes were made, but at least they can be explained emotionally, if not logically. Anyway, back to the duel. It's Gary's turn. He draws and gets Living Fossil. He activates, reviving his unknown Synchron. He then normal summons Wing Karibo. Gary has his level 1 Synchron, tune his level 1 Wing Karibo to Synchro summon his second Formula Synchron. Formula lets him draw a Magnet Reverse, and now to Excel Synchro. Gary has his level 2 Formula Tuner tune his level 8 Stardust Dragon to Sparking Synchro summon. Level 10, Stardust Chronicle Spark Dragon. Gary uses Chronicle's effect, banishing the original Stardust to make Chronicle immune to other card effects this turn. Battle phase, Gary has Chronicle crash into Starlight. Both monsters are destroyed in battle. Chronicle's effect activates upon destruction, reviving a banished Synchro Dragon. OG Stardust Dragon is resurrected, and Gary has to attack George directly, knocking him down to 4,600 life points. Gary ends his turn. George knows the other two have Arc Hyper Legendaries. That's why he chose to save the defense draw for a bit later in the duel. Why waste your one-use shield on a baseball bat when you know the opponent has a gun? No misplace. It's Gradion's turn. He draws and gets TG Booster Raptor. Now the pieces are in place. He normal summons his tuner, Tech Genus Gear Zombie. Next, since he controls a Tech Genus monster, he special summons Tech Genus Booster Raptor. He then has level 1 Zombie, tune his level 1 Raptor, Synchro Summon, level 2, TG Replicro Dragonfly. He activates the effect. It can send a Synchro monster he controls to the graveyard to resummon its materials. He uses it on Blade Blaster to resummon Power Gladiator and Star Guardian. It's go time! Gradian has level 5 Guardian, tune his level 5 Gladiator, and level 2 Dragonfly. Gradian Hyper Synchro summons, level 12,
TG Halbert Cannon!
Battle phase, Gradian attacks George directly, but George reveals his set defense draw. All damage is reduced to 0, and George draws 1 card, which is Soul Charge. Unable to do anything else, Gradian sets Grave Robber and ends his turn. Gradian could have attacked Gary's Stardust, but George was wide open while Gary controlled a monster. I see why he went for the easier opponent. More importantly, Gradian had an extra card in his hand. In fact, he has 2 extra cards in his hand, believe it or not. He started with 6 cards. -1 to Special Striker, -1 to Special Warwolf, -1 to normal Cyber Magician, -1 from using Rush Rhino as Synchro material in the hand, +1 to add Cyber Magician through Guardian's effect. Now everyone has their turn, back to Gradion, +1 for drawing, -1 for normal summoning Cyber Magician, -1 for using the other Rush Rhino as Synchro material, -1 by setting Dress. Everyone else goes, Gradion's turn again. +1 for drawing, -1 to summon Zombie, -1 to summon Booster Raptor. And he just set Grave Robber face down, as we're going to find out next turn, he's also got Golden Bamboo Sword. So, misplay, writers. It's a shame because the hand management has actually been pretty solid so far. But hey, there's a 3-way duel going on. Sometimes a mistake or two slips through. Even I've made some mistakes. Plus, all 3 of them just spamming desires would get really old really fast, so at least they're trying to do a variety of ways to draw extra cards. But hey, at least it doesn't take away from a very entertaining duel. And speaking of the duel, it's George's turn. He draws and gets another Pot of Desires. He activates it, banishing 10 to draw Forbidden Droplets and Balance of Judgment. He activates Soul Charge, then quickly chains Droplets. He sends Charge to the graveyard to negate Halbert's effect for this turn, as well as halve its stats. Now for Charge, he pays 3,000 life points to revive 3 monsters, Scarlet and 2 red Resonators. He uses one of the red's effect to gain life points equal to Scarlet's attack points. And with no further interruptions, George has his 2 Resonators double tune his Scarlet. He Hyper Synchro summons level 12
Red Nova Dragon!
As much as George would love to cause further destruction, due to Soul Charge's downside, he's unable to attack this turn. So he simply sets Balance of Judgment face down and ends his turn, so Halberd's effect and stats are back. It's Gary's turn. He draws and gets Monster Reborn. He activates it to revive Gradion's Replico Dragonfly. Next, he activates Magna Reverse to revive a monster that cannot be normal summoned or set. He revives Formula Synchron. And now it's time to complete this holy threesome. He has his level 2 Formula, tune his level 2 Dragonfly, and level 8 Stardust. Gary Hyper Synchro summons level 12
Shooting Quasar Dragon!
Gary ends his turn, and then the trio get a visit from the grandfather, who's come back to tell them that things were so much better back in his day. In fact, back in his day, he used to walk to school in the blistering hot sun, uphill both ways, with pyramid blocks in their backs, and they liked it. If you think waiting for GTA 6 is bad, try waiting for GTA 1. But the winner of this Inheritor Duel will get a whole nickel from him, so they can buy the newest Sega console. Gary and Gradion would be delighted to have this new console, while George just wants it so he can burn it. With this newfound motivation, the trio return to the duel. It's Gradion's turn. He draws and gets Cursed Bamboo Sword. He activates Grave Robber, so he can steal a spell card from the opponent's graveyard. He takes Gary's Monster Reborn. He activates it, paying 2,000 life points in the process to revive Gary's Scarred Warrior. Turnabout is fair play. Next, he equips Halberd Cannon with Cursed Bamboo Sword. It doesn't give him a power boost, but if Gradion sends another Bamboo Sword to the graveyard, Halberd can attack directly. Following that up, he activates Golden Bamboo Sword. Since he controls a Bamboo Sword, Gradion can draw 2 cards. He gets a second Cursed Bamboo Sword and Feast of the Wild, level 5. Then Gradion equips a second Cursed Bamboo Sword onto Halberd. Then sends the second curse to the grave so it can attack directly this turn. Next up, he activates Feast of the Wild level 5. This lets him summon up to 2 level 5 monsters from his hand or grave, but their effects are negated and they can't attack. But Gradion only wants 1. His Synchro Tuner, Star Guardian. Gary and Gradion decide to put their differences aside them for the sake of the Sega console, and to protect it from George. Gradion has his level 5 Guardian tune Gary's level 5 Scarred Warrior to Synchro Summon Shooting Star Dragon, Tech Genus Expansion. Gary then reveals the set Forbidden Chalice. Now Nova gains 400 attack points but loses its effect, so it only has 3,900 attack points. Ignore the stat bar, that's a typo. Gradion orders Halberd to attack George directly. George takes 4,000 points of damage to the face, and is knocked down to just 600 life points. Finally, Gradion ends his turn, so Nova's effect and attack return to normal. Yes, it shows him setting 2 cards, but his hand is actually empty, and he never activates them anyway, so we'll give him a pass. Okay, so we gotta go over a couple things. Let's start with Gary this time to give Gradion a break. Why he saved Chalice for so long? I imagine since he knew the other 2 had Arc Hyper Legendaries, it would be good to save the negate for one of them, and not one of their smaller monsters. It would have been good against the Red Resonator and all of George's healing, but it makes enough sense to save it for the big bad, so we'll give him a pass. But now we have to get to the really big misplay, and I'm sorry to be bullying on you, Gradion, but it was from you. Right now, Red Nova has 3,900 attack points and the inability to negate attacks, and Halberd has 4,000 attack points. Forget the direct attack. Have Halberd kill Nova and do 100 damage. Then Shooting Star attacks directly for 3,300. Yes, George will have 1,200 life points, but Arc Hyper Legendary is gone for good, and he has no way to get it back. Though I get that Gradion just paid to allow Halberd to attack directly, so naturally he'd want to attack directly. He just paid for it and everything. But in this case, getting rid of the opponent's biggest threat is way more important than extra 600 damage. Plus, Shooting Star just kind of sat there in the end anyway, so it's ultimately pointless, much like Blade Blaster. So, I'm sorry, Gradion, but getting rid of opponent's giant monster is more important than Big Numba. Also, Feast of the Wild level 5 could revive Power Gladiator, but honestly, that one's a nitpick, and trust me, it's not going to matter in the long run. He was going for symbolism, and honestly, that's fair play. These are all very unfortunate misplays, Gradion, and I'm sorry to say, all of them are about to come back to bite you right now. It's George's turn. He draws and gets his 3rd Red Resonator. George is done screwing around. He activates Balance of Judgment. Since Gary and Gradion control 4 more cards than he does, he gets to draw 4 cards, and they are Fire Princess, Double or Nothing, Raigeki Break, an unknown card that's just discarded, so we're going to call it his 3rd Pot of Desires, and he's too low on cards to be able to use it. He normally summons Red Resonator, and uses its effect to special summon Fire Princess from his hand. He has Red Resonator, Toon Princess to Synchro Summon, Adamancipator, Risen Leonite. George activates Leonite's effect, revealing the top 5 cards of his deck, and adding an Adamancipator card to his hand. He only has one choice, but that's all he needs. He takes Adamancipator Researcher. And since he controls an Adamancipator, he can special summon her. Next, George has his level 2 Researcher tune his level 6 Leonite to Synchro Summon level 8 Lavalval X-Lord. Battle phase. George orders his 5,500 attack point Red Nova to attack Halberd Cannon. Gradion responds with Shooting Star's effect. Once per turn, it can negate an attack. But George was expecting that. He activates X-Lord's effect. Since an opponent's monster activated, that monster is destroyed and the opponent takes 1,000 burn damage. That said, the effect still resolves, so Nova's attack was negated. But George activates his quick play spell Double or Nothing. This lets Nova attack again, and with his attack points doubled, all the way up to 11,000. George says goodbye and reminds Gary what he's fighting for, to save Espigo and his family, before being eliminated. From Duel and from life. Gary is heartbroken by another person dying in front of him, and all because of a heritage he never asked for. But George doesn't care. They were ganging up on him anyway, and besides, now he's one step closer to ultimate power. And if Gary can only win with help, well then, He never really was a threat, now was he? George sets Raigeki Break and Imperial Iron Wall face down and ends his turn. Yeah, he had an extra card in his hand, but to be fair, next turn he's going to draw a card and not use it, so we'll just give him a pass. We're near the end anyway. It's Gary's turn. He draws and gets Reckless Greed. Before Gary can do anything, George activates Raigeki Break, discarding Desire to destroy Quasar. Gary uses Quasar's effect to negate Raigeki Break, but George was expecting that. He uses X-Lord's effect, destroying Quasar and dealing Gary 1,000 points of damage. But when Quasar dies, Gary can special summon Shooting Star Dragon from his extra deck in attack mode. Battle phase, Gary has Shooting Star attack X-Lord. George is knocked down to Sparks for game. Gary sets Reckless Greed and Limit Overdrive face down and ends his turn. It's George's turn in the penultimate turn of the duel. He draws and gets something. George does the unthinkable. He reads Shooting Star Dragon, luring it can banish itself to negate an attack. He activates a continuous trap Imperial Iron Wall. Now neither player can remove cards from play. George orders Nova to attack Shooting Star. Gary takes 1,700 points of damage and is knocked on his back. George ends his turn. Technically, he should be taking extra 500 damage, which actually wouldn't affect the outcome of the duel, but errors happen and we're on to the final turn anyway, so it gets a pass. Gary contemplates giving up. It'd be so much easier than continuing the struggle, but he remembers everyone he's fighting for and how far he's come. He didn't go through all these trials and tribulations just to quit. He sits back up. George, however, is through playing games. He unleashes the full power of his blood sign and tries to kill Gary, but Gary blocks, refusing to just lie down and die. George runs out of power and curses Gary, but Gary gets up and takes his turn. It's Gary's turn, and the final turn of the duel. He draws and gets a mysterious card that's never used and is only discarded, so we're calling it Jester Confit. He tells George he's met a lot of bad people, but in the end, they always had a reason. But George, or rather, Red Nova, just destroys for the sake of destruction. George says Gary doesn't even know the first thing about him, but Gary doesn't want to learn, because having a reason for being evil doesn't make you a good person. He activates his set Reckless Greed, drawing 2 cards, which are Instant Fusion and Super Polymerization. He activates Instant Fusion, paying 1,000 life points and asking Espego for help. To Fusion Summon, level 5, Invoke Raijin. Up next, a gift from his best friend Corey. He activates Super Polymerization, discarding Jester Confit. To fuse Raijin with George's Red Nova, he fusion summons level 10, invoked Elysium. Battle phase, Gary orders Elysium to attack George directly, and the epic Inheritor Duel finally comes to an end. So really, who would have won the Inheritor Duel? My money's still on Gary. George dueled too aggressively, and as we saw, he burned through too many resources extremely quickly. If he didn't get all those draw cards, he would have run out of steam very early on. Even with all his aggression, he only survived because the other two were more passive players. Especially Gradion, who honestly was closest to win besides Gary. The only problem is that he kept choosing the passive route and not attacking at optimal times. And when he did attack, he picked the wrong target. Granted, Gradion did just wake up from basically death just to be put in another life or death situation. But I still gotta give the facts. In a 3-man fight, you can let the other two beat each other up, but eventually you have to throw a punch. Gary, meanwhile, was the most balanced of the two. He was aggressive when the moment called for it, but passive when the situation called for it. He was just the better of the 3 men. Heck, there was even a card in his hand he never used, so in a way, he was kind of holding back. And while the duel did get kind of screwy towards the end, it only did to help the overall story of Heritage and give an entertaining climax. And in that regard, it certainly succeeded. But what do you all think? Did you notice any misplays that I missed? Who do you think would have won the Inheritor Duel? Be sure to let me know in the comments below, and be sure to check out Gary's channel for more pack openings, Yu-Gi-Oh! Related videos, and of course Heritage itself. Links in the description. With all that said, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and they're up, Shidong.